What if a single warning from one of the world's most unpredictable leaders could quietly redraw the global balance of power? Tonight, analysts are asking a chilling question. Is this just political rhetoric, or the first signal of a new strategic alliance forming between Pyongyang and Tehran? Because if Kim Jong-un's message is more than a warning, then the world may be witnessing the early moves of a much larger geopolitical game, one that could reshape global security, energy markets, and the future of international power, and almost no one is prepared for what could come next. For most of the world, it began as another headline in a long list of global tensions. But for analysts watching international power dynamics closely, the message coming from Pyongyang carried far more weight than a typical political statement. North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un had issued a warning. The message was direct, and the timing was not accidental. It arrived during a moment of deep uncertainty in the Middle East, when regional politics were already shifting rapidly. According to reports circulating among international observers, Kim suggested that if Iran's leadership were targeted, North Korea could respond by supporting Tehran with its nuclear capabilities. To many casual observers, the statement sounded dramatic. But geopolitical analysts rarely focus on drama. Instead, they focus on patterns, strategy, and long-term signaling. And when they looked closely at Kim's warning, they saw something much more important. They saw a signal. In international politics, leaders rarely speak without purpose. Every statement is part of a broader strategy. Sometimes the goal is to intimidate an opponent. Sometimes it is meant to reassure allies. And sometimes the goal is simply to send a message that changes how other governments calculate risk. Kim Jong-un's warning appeared to fall into this third category. To understand why, analysts first looked at the broader context surrounding the statement. The Middle East was already facing a major political shock. Reports had emerged about the assassination of Iran's former supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, during the early phase of an operation that some observers referred to as Operation Epic Fury. The event, whether confirmed in full detail or not, had already begun to reshape political conversations across the region. Leadership changes in powerful countries rarely happen quietly. They often trigger uncertainty, especially in nations where leadership plays a central role in maintaining political stability. Iran was no exception. The reported transition of power to Mojtaba Khamenei introduced new questions about how Iran would position itself on the global stage. Would the country continue the same strategic path? Or would new leadership alter its relationships with allies and rivals? For governments around the world, these questions mattered. But for North Korea, they mattered even more. Pyongyang has long viewed leadership security as one of the most critical aspects of national survival. The government's entire strategic doctrine has been built around protecting the regime from external threats. For decades, North Korean leadership has studied how other governments collapsed after their leadership structures were removed. From Iraq to Libya, there were examples that North Korean planners often discussed privately. In each case, the removal of a central leader triggered rapid political change. These events created a deep fear inside Pyongyang, the fear of what military strategists call a decapitation strike. A decapitation strike is a military strategy designed to remove the leadership of an enemy country at the start of a conflict. The idea behind such operations is simple. If the leadership disappears, the government may collapse quickly, and resistance could weaken before a war fully begins. For countries like North Korea, the concept of a decapitation strike represents an existential threat, and that fear shapes almost every strategic decision Pyongyang makes. This is where Kim Jong-un's warning becomes easier to understand. By speaking publicly about the possibility of supporting Iran, Kim was not necessarily preparing for immediate action. Instead, he appeared to be reinforcing a broader principle. Leadership targeting would not be tolerated without consequences. It was a deterrence message. Deterrence works by shaping the thinking of potential adversaries. If an opponent believes that certain actions will trigger severe consequences, they may decide that those actions are not worth the risk. North Korea has relied on this logic for decades. Its nuclear program, missile development, and strategic messaging have all been designed around the same goal: convincing potential enemies that attacking the regime would carry unacceptable costs. But in this case, something was slightly different. Kim's warning did not focus only on North Korea, it referenced Iran. That detail immediately caught the attention of defense analysts across the world. For years, experts had suspected that Iran and North Korea maintained quiet channels of cooperation, particularly in areas related to missile technology and military research. Both countries faced heavy sanctions, both had tense relationships with Western governments, and both had strong incentives to develop partnerships that could reduce their isolation. Yet cooperation between them had usually remained discreet. Kim's message suggested something more visible. It hinted at the possibility that North Korea was willing to publicly link its strategic posture with Iran's leadership security. Even if the statement was largely symbolic, the symbolism mattered. Because international politics often works through signals rather than actions, A signal can change how countries prepare for the future. It can influence military planning, diplomatic negotiations, and economic expectations. Within hours of the warning, analysts across Washington, Seoul, Beijing, and European capitals began discussing the implications. Was this simply political theater? Or was it the first visible sign of a deeper geopolitical alignment forming between Pyongyang and Tehran? At that moment, no one could answer the question with certainty. But one thing was clear. Kim Jong-un's message had introduced a new variable into an already unstable geopolitical equation, and when new variables appear in global politics, the consequences often unfold slowly but profoundly, because sometimes the most important shifts in world affairs begin not with explosions or battles, but with a carefully chosen warning. When Kim Jong-un's warning reached international headlines, many people focused only on the words themselves. A nuclear warning always captures attention. But for geopolitical analysts, the real question was not the warning. The real question was the relationship behind it. Because North Korea and Iran have not suddenly become connected. Their relationship has been developing quietly for decades, far from the public spotlight. And understanding this hidden partnership is the key to understanding why Kim's message matters. To begin with, the two countries share something very unusual in global politics. Both nations exist under heavy international sanctions. Sanctions are economic restrictions placed on a country by other governments. They limit trade, financial transactions, and access to international markets. For most countries, these restrictions can create serious economic pressure. North Korea has lived under sanctions for many years because of its nuclear weapons program. Iran has also faced major sanctions due to concerns about its nuclear activities and regional policies. Because of this shared situation, both governments developed a similar mindset. They learned that survival often depends on finding partners who face the same pressures. Over time, this pushed North Korea and Iran toward cooperation. In the 1980s and 1990s, their relationship began mainly through military technology. Iran was looking to strengthen its missile capabilities during a time when it faced serious security threats in the region. North Korea, meanwhile, had developed significant experience in missile design. This created an opportunity. Analysts believe that early missile programs in Iran showed strong similarities to North Korean designs. Some experts argue that this was not a coincidence. Instead, it may have been the result of shared knowledge, technical advice, or indirect cooperation. While neither country has openly confirmed these partnerships, many defense researchers have pointed to the technological similarities as evidence of quiet collaboration. For both governments, the benefits were clear. Iran gained access to advanced missile knowledge that would have taken many years to develop independently. North Korea gained financial support and an important strategic partner in a different part of the world. This relationship slowly expanded, but it was never meant to be highly visible. Both countries understood that openly announcing deep cooperation could trigger stronger international reactions. As a result, most collaboration remained subtle and indirect. This is why Kim Jong-un's recent warning caught the attention of global analysts, because it suggested something slightly different. For the first time in years, the connection between Pyongyang and Tehran appeared to move into the open. And when relationships that were once quiet become public, it often means the strategic environment is changing. To understand why this matters, it is important to look at how geopolitical alliances form. Most alliances are not built overnight. They grow slowly as countries discover shared interests. Sometimes those shared interests involve economics. Sometimes they involve security. In the case of Iran and North Korea, security concerns appear to be the strongest link. Both governments believe that external military pressure poses a serious threat to their stability. Both worry about strategies designed to weaken their leadership or influence their domestic politics. This shared perception creates a powerful incentive for cooperation. If two countries believe they face the same type of threat, they may decide that working together increases their chances of survival. This idea is not new in international politics. Throughout history, nations under pressure often form partnerships with others facing similar challenges. But there is another layer to this situation: geography. North Korea is located in East Asia. Iran sits in the Middle East. The distance between them is thousands of kilometers. On the surface, this separation might suggest their strategic interests should remain independent. Yet modern geopolitics does not always follow geography alone. Technology, trade routes, and communication networks have connected distant regions in ways that were impossible in the past. A partnership between Pyongyang and Tehran could create influence across two very different strategic theaters: East Asia and the Middle East. Both regions already hold enormous importance for global security. East Asia contains some of the world's largest economies and several major military powers. The Middle East sits at the center of global energy markets and major trade routes. If cooperation between North Korea and Iran becomes more visible, it could link tensions in both regions together. This possibility is exactly why Kim Jong-un's message triggered such intense discussion among analysts. Because sometimes, A single statement reveals a deeper shift already taking place behind the scenes. At the moment, no one can say exactly how far this partnership may develop. Some experts believe the warning was mainly symbolic. Others believe it could represent a signal that cooperation between the two countries is becoming more direct. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. In the world of geopolitics, relationships formed quietly in the shadows can eventually shape events on a much larger stage. And if the connection between Pyongyang and Tehran continues to strengthen, then the balance of power in two critical regions of the world may begin to change at the same time. In global politics, nuclear weapons rarely speak through explosions. They speak through messages. Kim Jong-un's warning was not simply about Iran. It was part of a much larger language used in international security, the language of nuclear deterrence. To understand this language, analysts do not focus only on the words that leaders say. They focus on what those words are meant to achieve. And in most cases, nuclear statements are not about starting wars. They are about preventing them. This idea sits at the center of modern nuclear strategy. Since the end of the Second World War, nuclear weapons have changed how powerful countries think about conflict. The destructive potential of these weapons is so extreme that using them would create consequences far beyond a normal war. Because of this, nuclear powers often treat their arsenals as political tools rather than battlefield weapons. The real goal is deterrence. Deterrence works through fear and calculation. If a country believes that attacking another state will trigger a devastating response, it may decide that the attack is simply not worth the risk. This logic has shaped global security for decades. North Korea understands this very well. For Pyongyang, nuclear weapons are not just military assets. They are the ultimate guarantee that the regime will survive external pressure. Every missile test, every military parade, and every warning from its leadership carries the same message: do not threaten the survival of the state. Because if that line is crossed, the consequences could be unpredictable. Kim Jong-un inherited this strategy from his predecessors, but he has also expanded it. Over the past decade, North Korea has accelerated its missile development programs, testing systems capable of traveling thousands of kilometers. Some of these missiles, according to international analysts, could potentially reach targets far beyond East Asia. The purpose of these tests is not always about preparing for war. Often, they are about demonstrating capability. In the world of nuclear politics, showing what you can do can be just as powerful as actually doing it. This is why Kim's statement about supporting Iran drew so much attention. The message suggested that North Korea might extend its deterrence logic beyond its own borders. In other words, Pyongyang was hinting that threats against Iran's leadership could trigger consequences involving North Korea's strategic power. Even if the statement was largely symbolic, the symbolism carried weight. Because nuclear signaling rarely exists in isolation. It always affects the calculations of other countries. For the United States and Israel, both of which closely monitor developments in Iran, the statement introduced a new variable into the strategic equation. Even if North Korea had no immediate intention of intervening in Middle Eastern conflicts, its warning suggested a willingness to become politically involved in the issue. And involvement in nuclear politics can quickly complicate diplomatic decisions. But there's another dimension that concerns analysts even more: nuclear proliferation. Proliferation refers to the spread of nuclear technology or weapons to additional countries. Since the early days of the nuclear age, global powers have tried to prevent this from happening. The fear is simple. The more countries that possess nuclear weapons, the greater the risk of miscalculation or escalation. If alliances form between states with nuclear capabilities and those seeking advanced military technology, experts begin to worry about possible technology transfers. For years, researchers have debated whether North Korea has shared missile expertise with other nations. While direct evidence is often difficult to confirm publicly, similarities in missile design between different countries have raised questions. These concerns are part of why Kim's warning is being studied so closely. Even if the statement itself does not signal immediate cooperation, it highlights the possibility of deeper strategic connections. And in nuclear politics, even small possibilities can shape major decisions. Governments must always prepare for the worst-case scenario. This is why military planners in multiple countries analyze statements like Kim's in great detail. They examine the wording, they examine the timing, and they examine what the message might be intended to influence. Sometimes these signals are meant for international audiences. Sometimes they are meant for domestic audiences inside the country itself. And sometimes they serve both purposes at the same time. For Kim Jong-un, the message may serve another function as well, demonstrating leadership strength. Inside North Korea, projecting power and confidence is a central part of political control. Statements that show defiance toward powerful countries reinforce the image of a government capable of defending national sovereignty. But beyond domestic politics, the global implications remain the real concern. Because nuclear warnings have a unique ability to travel far beyond the countries directly involved. They influence diplomacy. They influence military planning. And sometimes they influence financial markets that react quickly to signs of geopolitical instability. For now, Kim Jong-un's statement remains a warning rather than an action. But in international security, warnings can be powerful events on their own, because once nuclear signals begin circulating between governments, the entire global system begins adjusting its calculations. And when those calculations change, the balance of power can begin shifting in ways that are not immediately visible to the outside world. Sometimes, the most powerful consequences of geopolitical tension are not seen on battlefields. They appear in markets. They appear in energy prices. They appear in the quiet decisions made by governments, investors, and corporations, trying to predict what the world might look like tomorrow. Kim Jong-un's warning about Iran was not just a military message. For many analysts, it was also a signal that global political tensions could begin influencing economic stability in unexpected ways. When major powers exchange threats or warnings, the effects rarely stay limited to politics. They spread across the global system. The first place this ripple effect is often felt is the energy market. Iran plays a major role in the global energy landscape. The Middle East produces a large portion of the world's oil, and Iran sits near one of the most important shipping routes on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway carries a significant percentage of the world's oil supply every single day. If instability grows in the region, even the possibility of disruption can push energy prices higher. Traders in international markets watch political developments closely because uncertainty itself can influence prices. A single geopolitical warning can trigger questions. Could tensions escalate? Could shipping routes become less secure? Could sanctions tighten further? When these questions appear, markets react. Energy prices move. Insurance costs for shipping increase. Governments begin calculating how vulnerable their economies might be to sudden changes in supply. But the ripple effect does not stop with oil. Global trade networks are deeply connected. Modern supply chains stretch across continents. If tensions increase between powerful countries, businesses must begin preparing for potential disruptions. This is why geopolitical analysts and economic strategists often study political statements with the same attention, because a warning from one leader can influence decisions made in boardrooms thousands of kilometers away. Young entrepreneurs, business leaders, and investors often underestimate how closely economics and geopolitics are linked, but history shows that the two are almost impossible to separate. Wars, alliances, sanctions, and diplomatic tensions have shaped global markets for centuries. And the current situation involving North Korea and Iran raises an important question. Could emerging alliances between sanctioned states begin influencing the global balance of power? If countries under heavy economic pressure start coordinating their strategies, they may discover new ways to resist isolation. This does not necessarily mean formal military alliances. In many cases, cooperation happens through quieter channels, technology exchanges, trade partnerships, political support in international forums, even coordinated messaging designed to challenge existing power structures. These types of relationships can slowly reshape how international systems function. For decades, the global order has been influenced by powerful institutions, economic alliances, and security partnerships led by major world powers. But history shows that the global system is never completely stable. New partnerships emerge. Old alliances change. Strategic calculations evolve. Kim Jong-un's warning may represent one small piece of that larger puzzle. It raises the possibility that countries facing similar external pressures may increasingly coordinate their responses. If this trend continues, it could influence multiple regions at the same time: East Asia, the Middle East, and potentially even parts of Europe and Africa, where geopolitical influence often intersects with economic interests. But perhaps the most important impact is psychological. In international politics, perception often matters as much as reality. When governments believe that alliances are forming against them, they begin adjusting their strategies. Military planning changes, diplomatic negotiations become more cautious, defense spending may increase. These reactions can create a chain effect across the international system. One country increases its defenses. Another country responds by strengthening its own position. Soon, a cycle of strategic competition begins. This process does not happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, through decisions that appear small at first but gradually reshape global relationships. For business leaders and entrepreneurs, these developments carry important lessons. Economic stability depends heavily on geopolitical stability. When global tensions rise, the ripple effects can reach industries, financial markets, and investment strategies. Energy prices may fluctuate. Trade routes may face new risks. Governments may introduce new regulations or sanctions that reshape entire industries. Understanding geopolitics is no longer just the job of diplomats or military planners. It has become essential knowledge for anyone trying to navigate the modern global economy, and that is why warnings like the one issued by Kim Jong-un attract such intense attention, not because they guarantee conflict, but because they introduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the most powerful forces in international affairs. For now, the world remains in a waiting period. No immediate military escalation has followed the warning. Diplomatic channels remain active. Global markets continue functioning. But beneath the surface, analysts across governments and institutions are watching carefully. Because sometimes the earliest signals of global change do not appear as dramatic events. They begin quietly, with a single warning that forces the entire world to start asking new questions about the future.